Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is William Keat of lawandalchemy.org and commonlawconstitution.org. And we're carrying on the series on individualism and collectivism. And I think this is now part 3. And this is going to be centering on free will, which is the word that we're going to give to the thing that we've already discovered, which is natural rights. So when you engage in your natural rights, you are exercising your free will. That's essentially what we're calling it. And so in the previous video, we were looking at right behavior and wrong behavior and looking at the sort of objectivity of that. It's not quite that although it's discoverable in the universe, it's discoverable through experience. Your interactions, if you like, with other human beings. It's not something that you can necessarily discover through first principles, just simply through logic and reason only. But I think very much, and through conscience, of course, and we all have a moral compass as well. You can very much say that we all have a sense of what is right and wrong. And the very fact that we all have that sense of right and wrong, and it's pretty similar, even if it isn't precisely the same in everybody, because there are exceptions to that. People who don't have a sense of good conscience, they do exist. But most people in general, your conscience works the same. And that means that there is a definite pattern to morality that can be discovered and come to be known within the universe. And that's what we looked at the last time. So that was just a quick summary of that. So now we're looking at free will, and the opposite of free will is what we already looked at, which is the boundaries of you exercising that free will or engaging within your natural rights. The boundaries to that, we reckon, is, of course, the natural existence of other people also having a right to exercise their free will as well. And that's what we're just looking at again now. So exercising your free will whilst observing one's own boundaries. And you can translate that into this useful line. My rights end where another's begin. Yeah, so that's a really important line to remember, that. My rights end where another's begin. And in a way, that's an encapsulation of the very principle, the foundational principle of individual rights, or individualism, which is what we're talking about there. And as we explored previously, if you try and argue against that and you favor something else other than your natural rights, you're a collectivist, essentially, and it all breaks down and gets very tricky. So we're talking about reserving that space for another human being to allow them to exercise their own free will. Yeah, and so this is a reciprocal arrangement through the regard for another. Yeah, so this is about reserving a space for another individual, recognizing their need for self-determination and individuality. And you could say that it's that same self-determination and individuality that I myself enjoy. So there's a recognition that I can't very well expect others to recognize my space if I don't do the same for others. Yeah, that's where you spot the equity coming into play, the boundaries, within the boundaries and the structure of it. Yeah. Now, this is important that it's a voluntary action. Yeah, we don't only respect other people's free will just because if we didn't, then others wouldn't respect ours. You know, if it was that sounds a bit selfish. You know, you're only doing it because you know that you couldn't really expect others to respect your free will, so I better respect theirs as well, sort of thing. It's not like that either. It's also because you want to respect other people's free will. Why is that? Because we take pleasure in seeing others exercising their own free will, but also we feel their pain when their free will is breached. Yeah, and that is the connectivity that we experience with each other. And this is quite interesting. Because it brings us to another understanding that we experience empathy of others through or within our separation and through our individuality, which is a bit of a paradox. Yeah, so it's only through our separateness and our experience of being separated that we actually fully come to appreciate how others feel in that separation, in that connectedness. Yeah, it's only in that desire to want to recognize the space for another that we prove our unselfishness. So individualism displays a lack of selfishness, contrary to what we have been programmed to believe often. Yeah, we often have that as individualists, we often have that accusation thrown at us that we're selfish because we're only thinking about ourselves, but we're not. Quite clearly, we're thinking about the other person as well. And so what it is a philosophy of non-interference. Yeah, I'm not going to interfere in your space. And in return, I expect you not to interfere in mine as well. But I will not interfere, but I will offer to help you if you want. Yeah, it's all a voluntary thing. And if you're not going with this arrangement, there's something very wrong in the way that you're thinking, I would argue. Now, let's just wrap this up by putting some visuals up as well, because I think this is quite useful sometimes to do this. And I've got a bit of a reputation for putting some animations and graphics and things together. So let's do that. So here's our free will. Here's a man. He's looking very suave. And what is he doing? He's influencing. He's expressing himself. He's taking action in the world, and he's putting out his influence in the world as an individual. Yeah, and that's enacting your free will. So let's just consider this issue that again of the limitation. And you can see I put a question mark at the top. Is it really a limitation? Yes, we can certainly see it as a boundary, but is it a limitation? Well, no, it's not really a limitation, but we'll come on to explain what that is. What is the nature of that boundary? Well, it's just simply the fact that you've got the free will of others around you to regard as well. And that's the nature of that boundary or limitation. It's not really a limitation because, why not? Because, of course, there's nothing to stop you from exceeding your rights. Yeah, there's nothing to stop you from committing a crime. You can do that, but what is the effect of that when you exceed that point? Well, basically, the consequences that you're going to get back are cease to be positive but become negative. So the limitation isn't really a limitation as such. It's just simply what you can put up with in the way of negative consequences. And that's the equity, isn't it? So one last thing that's quite interesting to think about is that the free will, which is the green arrows, the sense of possibility of the future, what you could choose to do as an individual, that's the feminine expression of being creative. And it's also the unpredictable nature of the feminine impulse, which is quite interesting there as well, which, by the way, is what they don't like. Powers that shouldn't be don't like that either. But that's the feminine expression, which is that sense of freedom and creativity and possibility of the future and the sense of unknown, the magic, if you like. And the masculine is the structure that comes about there as well, because you need that too. And that's where the balance comes into play there, of the hard lines of structure and the limitations, if you like. But as we said, it's not so much limitations, but more a demarcation point. Yeah, and that's the masculine expression, and that's the balance between those two things. That's the principle of gender in Hermeticism is quite an interesting thing to read about, but we need that balance point in the center on that. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. We'll go into some higher expressions of individualism and collectivism and see how it becomes more complex as we get into that. But up to this point, it was really about just clarifying those principles, those foundational principles. So I hope you found that useful. Cheers for now.